Welcome everyone to our webinar on corporate FAQs on carbon markets. My name is Rohma Arshad and I'm the sustainability lead at Resources Future. Our speakers for today's session are Minha and Rehman. Minha Hanif is the carbon markets lead at Resources Future and Rehman Yusuf is the carbon project development consultant. I would also like to take a moment to introduce Resources Future to everyone. We are an advisory firm and we focus on carbon project development, ESG, and climate policy across South Asia as well as other regions. And before we begin, I would like to mention that the recording of this session will be available later on our YouTube channel. I'll link it in the chat box. And feel free to use the chat box to post any questions. We will also open the floor towards the end of this session. And if you have any thoughts or questions, you can also unmute yourself and be part of the discussion. I now invite Minha to start this webinar.
Thank you, Roma, for introducing us. Like Roma said, we are hoping to keep this as interactive as possible. So even while we speak and just go over some basic stuff, you can post your questions along the way and hopefully we'll try and answer as many of them as we can. Rehman, should I start or do you want to say something before we go ahead?
Yes, please. Just wanted to welcome everybody who have joined us so far and hoping to see more people as and when they join. And like Minha and Roma said, we are expecting this to be a very interactive webinar. So if you have any questions along the way, just feel free to write them in the chat and we'll try our best to have a lot of time in the end to, answer questions, have your comments and just do a general discussion. So thank you.
All right, so this is the agenda for today. And just a disclaimer, we don't have to stick to the agenda at all because we don't know what your questions might be. So if you feel like that we missed anything or if there's any other basic stuff that you want us to cover, or if you have a question regarding your own project, you can, sort of relate to it and or ask us at the end, whatever you prefer. Okay, then I think the best way is to start with the key terminology. So we'll just quickly go over some of these terms. So first, carbon credit. It's basically a certificate that says 1 ton of CO2 has been reduced or removed from the atmosphere. And that is where like the trading happens. This is exactly what we trade. And where exactly do these credits live and move around? That's what the carbon registry does. It's like a digital bank. It tracks who owns which credit, when it was issued, transferred, or retired. And then is retirement. Retirement means that a credit has been used. It has been taken out of circulation, usually to offset someone's emissions. And once it's retired, it can't be, traded again. Then we have the PDD or project design document. This is your core file if you're developing a project. It outlines what your project is, what emissions it's reducing, how is it reducing the emissions, what methodology you're following, like the whole story. Project lifespan is exactly what it sounds like. It's the total period that your project runs and keeps generating emission reduction. So it might be 7 years, it might be 10 years. For NBS projects like afforestation and stuff, it could be up to, I think, 200 years. 50 to 100 is the normal range, I think. And vintage means the year in which the emission reduction actually happened. So if a credit is from a 2001 vintage, that's when the emission cut took place. All right. Baseline is where it all started. So this is what if we did nothing scenario. It shows the emissions that would have happened without the project. So for example, if you hadn't done this project, what would have been the emissions in that case? So everything that your project claims is compared against this as a standard. Then we have MRV, which stands for monitoring, reporting, and verification. It's a full system to sort of like track your project's performance, report data properly, and then get it independently verified. So this is becoming more digital, like even because of the AI, the use of AI becoming more mainstream. So there are a lot more options to make this digital. And so if you see DMRV written anywhere, that means digital MRV. So the two terms that often get mixed up are validation and verification. So validation happens before the project starts generating credits. And it's a check to see if your plan is solid, realistic, and eligible. And verification happens after the project has done its work. So it's a check on whether the emission reductions that you claimed in your PDD actually happened. Credit integrity is a big one. It means basically, is this credit trustworthy? Was it really additional? Was the reduction permanent? Has it been double counted? So a high integrity credit ticks all of those boxes. And lastly is the VCM, and this is the space where companies buy credits because they choose to. In the voluntary carbon market, this is voluntary. It's a voluntary market. So this is where most projects are currently operating.
Can I just add a few thoughts to the last slide,
Yeah.
Minha?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the first four ones, especially baseline, MRV, validation, verification, I just wanted to jump in and say that every carbon project has, no matter what the methodology is, where this carbon project is located, each carbon project has very important pillars of how the project stands. Baseline, MRV, validation, verification are four of those pillars. There are more. We'll be talking about additionality, permanence, leakage in the next slides. But no matter which methodology you're working on, you have to know what baselining is, how to go about MRV, a robust, transparent, high quality MRV, what to do with validation, verification, which by the way are both steps that are conducted by an independent third party. So no matter the project type and no matter the project standard, whether it's Vera, whether it's gold standard, whether it's any other standard you're working with, these are some very fundamental things that every project developer and also project buyers and investors should know about.
Yeah, hopefully we'll cover more on that in the later slides as well. So don't worry. I think we can go over a quick example, like to understand how carbon credits come into play. So in this scenario, let's imagine this is a wastewater treatment plant that's just letting methane escape into the air. This is going to be their business as usual scenario. This is where the emissions are high and uncontrolled, and methane is obviously worse than CO2 for climate in terms of its global warming potential. Now someone steps in and installs a system to capture that methane and undergo a process that sort of converts it into electricity, let's say, and the emissions drop. That change is like the drop from the original emissions to the new lower level that's measurable, right? So that measurable difference becomes the basis for carbon credits. And the more methane that you capture, the more credits you can earn. And each like 1 ton of emissions avoided is going to be 1 carbon credit. And that's how the project turns an improvement into the tradable asset. Anything you want to add, Rahman? Or just move on?
No, once again, so this is again a generic example, applies to all kinds of projects. And I just wanted to take a minute over here and ask the audience if they have any questions or anything to add at this point. Please feel free to, just keep writing it in the chat. That'll be really helpful for us to know how how we are progressing. Okay.
Okay.
So and next up, we just want to give you a structure of what are the key players in the carbon market, especially in the carbon project development space, um, who you should be reaching out to when you want to become a project developer, how you register a project, and what are some other important stakeholders globally that project developers, buyers, and investors must know of. So we'll start off with registries. Registries are basically carbon standards also, or registries are a way to track the generation and the retirement of carbon credits. So any project is certified and registered or accredited with a standard where they can list how many carbon credits have been generated from a project, whether they are verified, whether they are validated, and whether there is an annual system to track their emissions. Some of the big standards that are mentioned here are Vera, VCS, Gold Standard, Puro Earth, Isometric, ICR, and these are just some of them. There are a lot, many more. And one of the questions people usually have is, what is the difference between one standard and another? So there's multiple answers to that. The first one is every standard has multiple methodologies that they provide. For example, gold standard is generally considered good for project methodologies like clean cook stoves, whereas Vera is considered good for methodologies like afforestation, or their Red Plus methodology. Similarly, Puro Earth has a different set of methodologies that they are recognized for. So ultimately, you have to look at what the market demands, what kind of credits coming out from what standards the market demands, and then decide which standard or which registry you want to go with. So there's a standard, every standard has a methodology, and those methodologies dictate what your project is like and how you should develop it.
Thanks.
Can we
I
go on
think
to the
I have
next
a
slide?
few questions. I'll read them out.
Yeah, sure.
Is there any standard rate for carbon credit? So no, absolutely not. So I think that there are a lot of factors that go into the price of a carbon credit. So project type is one. So for example, let's take an afforestation project, for example. I think the credit price, I think Rehman, you would know this better, but I think generally between $10 to $30 a credit, I think, is the general range for any afforestation project. But carbon removal projects, like direct air capture or biochar, those ones go for much higher like rates. So I think the biochar one on the lower end is $150, and on the higher end is, I think, $350. And there are some that are, like, for example, direct air capture, that go for $900 per credit. So I think it mostly depends on the type of project, but then increasingly the trend has also started changing. So the more that you incorporate the communities or the biodiversity, and there are different labels to even assess these impacts, like the real on ground impacts, like how are the people benefiting, how is this affecting the biodiversity, and the better that you can make this measurable and reflect this in your MRV, the higher are your chances of getting like a better rate for your carbon credit. So the next question is, how should companies balance between reducing emissions and offsetting them? I don't think this is a balance. I think the first priority is obviously reducing emissions. So you can't offset something that you can reduce. And generally, I don't think you should be offsetting anything that you can't reduce. So for example, your scope 1, scope 2 emissions, you should try and reducing them, and maybe the scope 3, the remaining emissions can be offset and you can buy them as carbon credits. How can we
Yeah, and just
sell?
to
Yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
just to add to that answer, Minha. So, how should companies balance between reducing emissions and offsets? There are detailed, frameworks that provide guidelines to companies of all different sizes and geographies and sectors on how to go about firstly reducing their emissions, because it's very important to reduce emissions, and then once you've done most of the reducing that you can do, of course there are some residual emissions in the end that cannot be abated for. So those remaining emissions are usually the ones that are offset. So scope 1 and scope 2 are generally scopes that can be reduced in terms of your company's emissions. Scope 3, which is most of every company's emissions. A lot of that is required or encouraged to be reduced, but then it's not possible to reduce 100% of the emissions that a company is making, because obviously there are operations that cannot be completely stopped. So for those emissions that cannot be abated, carbon credits jump in and provide a mechanism to offset those emissions. So SBTI is one framework that is generally accepted by companies globally. And so I would really recommend you to go through the SBTI framework, a very long but very comprehensive guidance for companies on how to reduce and how to offset.
Thank you for elaborating on that. So the next one is, how can we sell carbon credits? So this is where the registries are. Rehman, you want to cover this as well? I don't think, yeah, you'd have to register first, I think, the project. The sale part comes at the very end. This is probably the last step.
Yeah, I think
And we'll
let's
we'll go
answer
through
that
the,
question when
yeah.
we come to the slide where
Yeah,
we're
yeah, we'll
telling
go
the
through the
whole
cycle.
cycle, right?
Yeah. What standard is followed by the Green Climate Fund? So Green Climate Fund is just a fund. It's not related to carbon markets as such. Tell me about Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. We'll go over this as well.
Yeah.
Any company deals with how to get carbon credit. Yeah, we'll cover this in a bit. Right. I hope this will answer most of the questions. Yeah. So this is the full process that your project goes through, and usually people think that you start by writing a PDD, and if you're sensible, this is not where your project is going to start. So maybe it's a better idea to do a feasibility first, and we'll talk about this more in the upcoming slides. Like, we also help our clients do this feasibility assessment, and then you do a baseline. Rehman, feel free to jump in. I think you can cover this a lot better since you have more experience on this.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a very, I would say, generic form, process of developing a carbon project. You always study with understanding if a project is eligible to generate carbon credits, because there are activities that remove or reduce carbon dioxide from the air, but it's important to know what the next steps in the process. And so starting from a project eligibility assessment is makes the most sense. At this stage we usually do a pre-feasibility study and then a feasibility study to see if whatever project we have in mind, for example, if it's a regenerative agriculture project, if it's an afforestation project, it could be a clean cooking or a mangrove restoration project, many different types of projects. It's important to see whatever you are planning is eligible with some sort of high quality standard that is generally acceptable, and whatever methodology you are going with. A methodology is a very comprehensive list of rules and requirements for a project to be generating high quality carbon credits. So it's eligibility assessment gives you a good picture of whether you should proceed or not. If you should proceed, then the next step is, conducting a baseline study, studying what is the current scenario right now, so that you can compare how your project is, performing compared to whatever is the business as usual scenario. And then, of course, stakeholder consultations are a very important part. Stakeholder consultation includes all kinds of different stakeholders, from the government to local governments to communities on ground to investors to just everybody who you think will be involved in the project moving forward. Then PDD, the project design document, which includes a lot of other details. For example, a detailed calculation of how many emissions are being reduced or removed from this project, what is the community engagement mechanism, what is the monitoring plan, how does the financials of the project look like. So all of those details go in this second step. Once the PDD is ready, which usually requires, I mean, if all the data is available, which of course it's usually not available, it takes anywhere from 6 months to, let's say, it could even take 2 years for somebody to, develop a very high quality PDD. Then that PDD is submitted to whichever standard you choose. Let's say you choose gold standard, or let's say you choose Vera. You submit this PDD, which is reviewed by the standard, and then there is a validation step. The fourth step is the validation audit. The standard appoints a third party to audit your project, and this is the validation step. Over here, the third party very critically looks at all of the project design, all of your assumptions that you have made, and any red flags are communicated at this point to the project developer, and they're asked to for clarification. At this point, this is a very tough stage for developers, because most validation audits result in a lot of tough questions, and so it's important to answer all of those questions, or if any changes are required in your project design, then make them at this point. Then after this audit is complete, the validator, which is the validation body, also called the VVB, gives a thumbs up or a green flag to the certification standard, and then the project is successfully registered. Once the project is registered, it means that now there will be a monitoring cycles, or MRV cycles, wherein after a certain period of time, which is decided in the PDD, it could be 1 year, it could be 2 years, it could even be 5 years. There will be monitoring once again by a third party, who will make sure that all of the the calculations or the projections that were made prior to the project registration are actually happening in the project. So there is continuous monitoring happening, and this monitoring, there is a monitoring report that comes out of it and is once again submitted to the standard, who verifies it and then generates carbon credits for
The next
your
cycle, yeah.
that
Yeah.
time period of your project. And so
So
this is how
I'd
it
also
keeps
like
going in
to
a cycle.
add one more thing here. So the reason that this is done, like let's say every year, is because it's possible that the amount of credits generated can be different in the next cycle. So for example, if you were doing an afforestation project, and in the first year it generated X amount of credits, but then there was a fire or something, or deforestation happened. So maybe next year the credits would be less, or maybe if you scaled up and planted more trees, the credits could be more. So this is why this is done like every year, and the number of credits can change during the life of the project.
Yep, precisely. Also, the this sixth, seventh, and eighth step is kind of goes in a cycle. Whatever the crediting period or the project lifespan is, there is there is constant monitoring happening, which results successful monitoring and successful results of that monitoring results in the issuance of carbon credits. So you have to keep going in a cycle until your project reaches its end.
And do you want to add the disclaimer that issuance does not mean that you start earning them as well, right? I think you would have to have a buyer of those credits to start earning from them. So just because they're registered on Vera, or if they're registered on Gold Standard, I think unless there's a buyer for your credits, these aren't monetized. I think, yeah.
Sorry, thank you for mentioning that, Minha, because that's a really important point to understand. Once carbon credits are issued by a standard, you own those credits as the project developer, but you necessarily do not have them sold. So you're not getting money from them before you sell them. And so there are multiple different ways of getting a buyer for your carbon credits. One is that whenever you get an issuance of the carbon credits, you sell them in the market, which is sold like a spot commodity. And for that, you need to find a buyer whenever an issuance takes place. But there are also ways to pre-sell those credits even before they're issued. And that makes it very easy for the developer to develop the project because that covers the initial capital cost required. So carbon credits from a project can be off taken or can be forward bought, or you can raise investment for your project in return of cheaper credits in the future, just so that every project requires a lot of capital in the beginning. And because carbon credit generation, depending on the project type, takes anywhere from 3 years to 5 to 7 years, to cover up for that time, a lot of developers, the ideal scenario is that they find a buyer who buys future credits that come out of their project rather than spot credits that will come out 5, 7 years later.
Yeah, and I think most people will be wondering, why would anybody buy a project that is not generating carbon credits yet? So usually, this is because this allows the investor to have like a very transparent view of, from the cradle of the project. Let's say he knows that there's no gaming involved, there's no double counting involved. Like the project is delivering what it might claim at the end. So this is a reason why investors may be ready to fund something like this. And this is back to the high integrity of the carbon project, because this way the investor can also make sure that you're not just offering them like an empty offset. Which is just a carbon dioxide offset. Let's say it's actually delivering more. It has community benefits, or it has like biodiversity benefits. So this is a very good option. I think we can take some questions from the chat before we move on. Is there any company that deals with how to get carbon credits? Yes, I think we call them brokers. We've also covered this in a bit. Scope 3 emissions are out of company's influence. How company can be required to buy credits for scope 3. So we're talking about the voluntary carbon market right now. So nothing is required by anybody. They're not required to buy credits at all, even for their scope 1 emissions at the moment. So some countries do have their own trading systems, and I think in some countries it is required, but generally for VCM, this isn't a requirement. And some companies do, I think, account for their scope 3 in whatever capacity that they can. This is how companies do become carbon negative as well. Will you provide a guideline for proposal of credits? So I think what you mean is a PDD, and we do offer this as a service. So if you have like a good carbon offset project, you can contact us, and we can guide you on how to write a PDD and how to assess if you've done your calculations correctly as well. So I think I'll move on to the next slide. And so this is a snapshot at a high level, what the carbon market ecosystem looks like. And it looks scary, but it's not that complicated, don't worry. So project developers, they're the one that are generating the carbon offsets, right? And the offsets are converted into credits, which are issued through the registries. And we just discussed the registry. So credits can then be sold directly or passed through resellers or brokers or like through different marketplaces. And then we have the buyers. So these are the corporations, these could be the investors. And when Article 6 comes, like even the governments can be involved here. Exchanges and auctions help match supply and demand, and derivatives are there to they just create more financial products based on credit pricing. So I think maybe future contracts, swaps, and then rating agencies. So the quality of the credit, these are dictated by the rating agencies. Like, so they guide you on how to assess that your carbon offset is of good quality, basically. And then market regulators, they make sure that the system stays credible and transparent. So I added some of the big names as examples here. Maybe you can take a screenshot. So these have all of the big names in the registries or the investors, the rating agencies. If you have any questions here, you can post them in the chat box, because I think this is a bit important to sort of understand how the
Yeah.
credit is generated and how it passes through the entire chain.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add here that this by no means is an exhaustive, list of all of the players in the market. Under each of these boxes, whether it's developers, resellers, registries, marketplaces, ratings agencies, etc., there are a lot of global, players that are operating in the market and providing their expertise for different project types. So, like we said in the beginning, if you want to decide which registry to go with for your let's say afforestation project, you have to study what are the pros and cons of going with that registry and the methodologies that are offered by that registry. Then you move on to the next step, which is okay, who are the buyers of afforestation credits? Is there even demand for it, or am I just thinking, oh, this sounds like a good idea, let's do it, and then later on nobody's there to buy my credits? So you have to think about this whole map of stakeholders or key players in the carbon market, and what is currently happening in the market. What are the market trends right now? Because the carbon market is something that evolves really quickly all the time, depending on regulations that are coming out, media coverage of some projects that are performing badly or are producing bad quality credits. So if there is media coverage about some kind of project type that is that gives bad reputation to its buyers, then suddenly you will see the price of that project credit type decrease, and then some others are preferred over the others. So it's important to understand who is who in the market, but it's also very important to understand that there's a lot more, and it's constantly evolving, the whole landscape of the carbon market.
Yeah, so for example, I think the rating agencies are fairly new. This whole section is fairly new. So this was a response to like the loss of the trust in the carbon credit, because there were some projects that were claiming an inflated number of carbon credits than they were actually generating. So we call this a market response. So in the market response, many we're seeing many rating agencies start appearing every day, honestly. So it's up to you, because whatever the kind of projects that you are planning, it's a good idea to look at these right from the start. Okay, should we move on?
Okay, so to very briefly touch on the carbon market policy in Pakistan, which is still under development, but we have had some successes in the recent past. So in the last COP29, November 2024, the Pakistan government introduced a policy framework for the carbon market of Pakistan. And because Pakistan is a signatory to the Paris Agreement, it is the carbon market policy is designed to, for project developers or players within Pakistan to participate in international carbon markets under the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. This opens up a lot of opportunities for especially project developers in Pakistan, because this means that you can develop a project in Pakistan, and once the policy is finalized, once even more rules are out in the open, it means that projects in Pakistan can sell credits internationally as part of the compliance Article 6 market as well. So there is a policy framework. I think it's some 10 or 12 pages of policy, rules that are part of the framework right now. But just to pick out a few of them, so there are some fees that are part of the framework. The first one is called the corresponding adjustment fee. It is around 12% of the credits that are generated from every project. And the second one, and yeah, the CAF corresponding adjustment is split equally between federal and provincial governments depending on where the project is located. Then there is a 1% administrative fee on the gross revenue, which is earned by the federal government or the Ministry of Climate Change. And then there's an NDC contribution, which is the nationally determined contribution, which every country in the Paris Agreement must have. So 5% of whatever the uh, credits are generated from a project in Pakistan will go towards this reserve that the government has made for its NDC. Um, so once you add these up, this becomes a cost head in your projects. But it's a very standard sort of cost that when we see all the other countries who are implementing Article 6 in their national systems, they have similar fee structures. What this gives Pakistan is a lot of opportunity to participate in the international carbon market. So, project developers get to engage in projects that are aligned with national priorities and international standards, which gives them a higher price premium, because you're not just selling in the voluntary carbon market now. You can also sell in the Article 6 market, which gives you a higher price. And then there is also potential to get capacity building and other support mechanisms from the government to start participating in this market.
Right. I think this is pretty much covered, but why does this matter for project developers? So the policy lays out a clear approval pathway, like Rahman said. So now you know that you have to start with the PEN, the project idea note, then move to a letter of intent, which will be issued, I think, by the MOCC, and then followed by your PDD, and then a no objection certificate. So generally, you will be allowed to have 2 years to complete your PDD, to be able to get the LOI issued, and I think the extension period is, I think, 180 days or something. And if you don't do the PDD until then, you would have to start again with the PIN. But yeah, it encourages private developers to engage, like Rahman said, not just for VCM, because it's offering you a guideline, but also for Article 6 linked projects where like there are international buyers and they may require corresponding adjustments. So you now have an access to international buyers with this policy, and the digital tools are being developed. So the registry, the National Carbon Registry, is being built right now, and I think it will be out soon. And it will allow private sector projects to generate and export carbon credits, especially with strong co-benefits or removals, as long as the proper approvals are in place. So for developers sitting on viable projects, this policy finally gives you a legitimate route to register, monetize, and scale them within an approved national framework.
Yeah, so I'm going to quickly go through this because I'm also mindful of time. I think we have a couple of more slides left. So just to give you an idea of what are the different categories or different types of projects out there and what are the current price trends. So the table on the left shows you the categories of project types, right? Forestry and land use is one category. Within this category, there's a lot of many different kinds of projects. So RED Plus is one, IFM, improved forest management is one, afforestation, agroforestry. These are different types of projects within a category. So if you look at all these different categories, you can see how much was the volume of carbon credits issued for each category, what was the cumulative value, and what was the average price, right? So forestry and land use stood at $9.27 in 2024, whereas renewable energy stood at $2.67. So you can clearly see, I think we had a question about the standardization of carbon credit prices. So over here, you can clearly see that there is no standard carbon price. And it depends on many different factors. For example, what is the cost of development? What is the market perception and reputation of the methodology or the project type you're working with? What are the additionality and permanence and co-benefit factors attached with your project? And then also project to project, what's unique about the project, right? So the table on the right shows you different project types within the forestry and land use category. Over here, I'd just like to direct your attention towards the Red Plus cluster and the percentage change on the rightmost column. You can see the price from 2023 to 2024 reduced 23% for Red Plus projects. And that's mainly because there was a lot of negative reputation due to media coverage of bad projects. But if you look at blue carbon, the last row, the price change has been quite a lot, right? So to 250, I think this should be 25.7, but if you look at the price, it raised from 8.33 to almost 29, $30. So the price increased in terms of blue carbon, which means that investors and buyers right now in the market are preferring more of blue carbon removal projects because they have a lot of benefits attached to it and less reputational risks compared to Red Plus. So all the different types of projects and methodologies are, subject to their own, I would say, factors that uh, dictate their prices.
Before we move on, I think we have a couple of more questions. Remind, you want to take the first one? If the policy is not materialized or faces delays in implementation, does this mean projects from Pakistan may not be eligible for carbon credits?
Yeah, that's a great question. The short answer is no, because if this policy is not materialized, that still means that voluntary carbon market projects in Pakistan are still eligible. So, for example, the Delta Blue Carbon project in Sindh, which is a mangrove project, is up and running. It is selling projects credits every monitoring cycle. So even and it came out even before this policy framework was in place. Uh, if there is delay or implementation does not happen for this policy, it means that voluntary carbon projects in Pakistan cannot participate in the Article 6 framework of the UNFCCC. That's all it means. And of course, that is bad for projects and bad for the national carbon market. But that doesn't mean that we will not be eligible for carbon credits, generally speaking.
So the next two questions are similar. So biochar will be categorized under waste management or agriculture, and hydropower will be categorized in which category. So you don't have to categorize the projects. You just have to look at the methodologies. So biochar has its own methodology. Vera just released their methodology for in 2025. But the more popular one is Pure Earth or ICS for biochar. Hydropower will also have its own methodology, and I think it comes under renewable energy.
Renewable energy.
So GCC I think could be a good option. But I'm just throwing out the mainstream names here. Obviously, it depends on your project scenario, your baseline, how you're planning on scaling up, and how are you benefiting the communities. So, for example, gold standard covers the SDGs properly better. So maybe it's better to see which methodology actually suits your project. You don't have to categorize them. The short answer is that just look at the methodologies. Okay, we're running out of time, so I think I'll quickly go over this. Let's imagine that you have a high potential carbon credit project, right? Good emission reductions, everything, and somebody tells you to go ahead and register it in Vera. But we recommend that before you jump into carbon markets like that, these are the core factors that you should be assessing. So project eligibility, your project type, location, technology allowed under a recognized methodology, project baseline, we just covered that, legal compliance, financial feasibility, will credit revenues outweigh your project costs, and is the market price viable for this project? Project timelines, like your rollout plan, when can the credit generation realistically begin? MRV, is your data collection plan strong enough for third-party verification? You want to make sure this is very important. Sustainability co-benefits, will the project create social environmental benefits beyond just carbon offsets? Risk mitigation, stakeholder engagement, carbon standard requirements. So each different standard has its own requirements. So if you're comparing two methodologies, you can see if the documentation meets the criteria. Long-term viability, can the project maintain performance and compliance across its full lifespan and crediting period? So this full analysis is a part of a structured feasibility service that is offered by Resources Future, and it can help you evaluate your readiness before you commit to the registration process, because the costs associated with the registration projects are very high. So you want to make sure that it's going to be worth your while. Moving on. Do we have any more questions? No, I think Rahman, you can take this.
Yeah, so I'll just quickly go through this, maybe take a minute to go through it, because we've discussed most of the stuff that's in here, but basically the quality of a carbon credit is something that is very, very important in today's market, because that dictates the price of your carbon credit, right? And obviously everybody would want the most high price for their credit. But there are some factors that determine how high integrity or how high quality your carbon credit is. Basic things like there should be a very strong additionality, which shows that emission reductions would not have occurred without this project taking place, or without carbon credit revenues. The monitoring, reporting, and verification (MRV) should be very robust. It should be transparent. Data should be, available, and should be collected in a high frequency. There should be legal and regulatory alignment. Of course, whichever country that you're operating in, the project should be aligned with the regulations of that country. But then also, whichever standard and methodology you're following, there should be alignment with those rules as well. Similarly, there should be no double counting, which means if you have a project that is um, uh, you know producing credits and saying this is a voluntary carbon market project that has 10,000 tons of carbon coming out, the same 10,000 tons should not be part of some government NDC, for example. So avoid double counting. There should be transparency in terms of the registry. You should only go with registries that are approved and have a high quality standard. So ICVCM, the Integrity Council of Voluntary Carbon Markets, is basically a body, a framework that decide that kind of um, um, you know decides the quality framework of the entire voluntary carbon market. So what they do is they review different standards and their methodologies, and then they approve or disapprove them based on how stringent and how high quality those methodologies and those standards are. So generally, ICVCM approved methodologies and standards are highly acceptable in the market now. Other frameworks, quality frameworks like that are Corsia, which is focused on aviation sector, and also CCQI. And then another uh, uh, s- way of assessing the quality of your carbon credits is through ratings agencies. These are private bodies that assess your carbon credits based on their own methodology. So they really study a project, what are the different rules that are being followed, what's wrong or what's right with the project, and then they assess different quality ratings to these projects. Higher the quality rating, better the uptake and better the price of your credits will be. I think we can move on from
Okay.
this.
So I think I'm going to pause here, and we had some questions over Zoom when people were registering. I'll read them out one by one. Just give me a second. Okay, so the first one was we are manufacturing microbial inoculum for agri inputs to increase fertilizer use efficiency and to replace chemical pesticides. How can we earn credits? Rehman, you want me to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So this one looks like a project that goes into the regenerative agriculture category, because regenerative agriculture project type basically counts how much soil organic carbon or how much carbon has been absorbed by the soil in farming activities. So just from the top of my head, VM0042 is one methodology under the Vera standard that allows you to quantify that carbon in regenerative agriculture projects. But then there's also other methodologies. There is one in gold standard, for example, and other standards that you could work with, because it sounds like it is an eligible project type.
Do reach out to us. I'd love to have a closer look at this and help you register this one. So the next one is what are the current regulatory frameworks or incentives in Pakistan that support companies in participating in the voluntary or compliance carbon markets, and how can SMEs effectively get involved? So like we just shared that the National Carbon Market Policy is out and it supports both voluntary and Article 6 markets. The policy outlines a formal approval process and encourages private sector participation, including SMEs. So there aren't direct financial incentives yet, but the simplified fees, the capacity building and access to international buyers, they are a part of the framework, and SMEs can start by identifying eligible projects and partnering with carbon consultants like ourselves, or maybe aggregators, and just navigate the registration process. The
Yeah,
next,
and
yeah.
just to quickly add a point to that. So there are projects that are large scale projects that require a lot of capital, and so the project developer needs to be a bigger company. But there are also different standards that support smaller scale projects. Gold standard has some. For example, Open Forest Protocol is one very new standard that supports very small scale forestry projects or agroforestry projects. So, for SMEs specifically, there is potential to to do project development, even if they're working on a small scale.
The next one was how to conduct carbon auditing for different industries. So carbon auditing involves quantifying a company's greenhouse gas emissions. The GHG protocol or the ISO 14064 are commonly used standards. So you'll need activity data, the emission factors for each source, and tools like GHG calculators or life cycle softwares. And then, then comes the third-party verifications for credibility. There's one in the chat box. I think that if a textile industry is adopting renewable energy, solar power, and want to sell carbon credits in the future, what will be the procedure? So we just talked about it. I think the best way forward is to do an eligibility assessment. So you can always reach out to us, and we can help you assess the eligibility of your projects and the entire roadmap, and we can have a fairly good estimate of the carbon credits that you can earn from your project. Reach out to me, and we can take this forward. So what is the typical cost of registering a project and making it eligible to sell a credit? So I think about $100,000 all in all, including the third-party verification and validation and the account opening. Yeah, I think $100,000 is a round figure.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is not just the registration cost. This also might include things like developing a PDD and gathering all of the different data and different studies that are required for your PDD. So also one more thing really depends on the scale of your project. If it's a huge project, then the cost might go up. If it's a smaller project, then it might be even lower than this.
One last question. I think this includes consultancy fee and registration fee. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so similar question on Zoom as well. So we just covered that. To what extent has the concept of carbon market been successful? So globally, carbon markets have raised billions in US dollars in climate finance, especially in developing countries. And they're increasingly becoming mainstream. In Pakistan, there's still early stage, but the interest is growing, and I think this is also because of the growing awareness that we're seeing new projects being developed and in the pipeline. The new national policy, presence of project developers, international demand for high quality credits, they signal a strong future potential. So several sectors, cook stoves, renewable waste, biomass, afforestation, they have already seen credit generating potential succeed internationally. And I think that all of these projects can be done locally as well. So I think, we just need more project developers. Okay, so I think these were all of the questions that we received on Zoom. And for the participants who have joined us here, you can always drop me an email or WhatsApp me. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to clarify. Just before we end this, this is just a sneak peek at our next webinar. So it's going to be on understanding financed emissions, meeting IFRS S1 and S2 demands, and our colleague Roma Arshid will be leading this session. So the exact date has not been announced yet, but do follow us on LinkedIn and stay in touch, and we'll share when we have a confirmed date.
Yeah. And I think we're still getting some more questions. So because we're out of time, I just wanted to quickly suggest this ChatGPT tool that basically helps answer all different kinds of questions for carbon project development specifically. It acts like an advisor for carbon project development, depending on what your understanding level is. So I'm sharing a link of that GPT. It's free to use in the chat, and I would really recommend people to ask all sorts of questions to it, because in its knowledge database there are documents from quality frameworks to methodologies and standards and all of this. So it does a good job in explaining all of the confusions that people usually I see have related to carbon project development in Pakistan. And of course, for more detailed eligibility assessments or even end-to-end carbon project development, Resources Future has a lot of experience, and we are also developing our own projects. One of them is two of them are actually agroforestry projects that I'm working on, and then there are some clean cooking and other types of projects that we're working on. But we also help project developers, go through the whole cycle and register projects and derive carbon credits from them. So please do get in touch with any questions that you might have, and we'll be happy to answer those and help you out.
Thank you all for joining us. This is it for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.